Hello, everybody. Delighted back with me. Here is our final panel for today. We have invited 4 of our colleagues who have all been participating in the Leaders program as visiting faculty, and I'm going to just hand over directly to them. I think it's our chair today is Jeremy.
Hello, everyone. We will try to get through this as best we can in terms of the camera. My name's Jeremy Clifford. My background is very much in regional media. I've got 35 years in running regional press. I'm now a consultant helping publishers with that digital transformation journey and also through generative AI consultancy. On my left, my immediate left, and the only person you can see at the moment is Sarah Hartley. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. Good to be here, and very interesting discussions earlier on so far. I'm your green chair for this session, so I'll be picking up on some of those points. Some of you know me through the program, but I'm basically involved in journalism entrepreneurship, and I also recently, well, 6 months ago, founded an environmental newsletter called The Northern Eco. So you'll hear a bit more from me shortly, but I'll pass you over to the other panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So moving on to Neil, who's on my immediate right.
Hello, everybody. I'm Neil Benson, former editorial director of Reach PLC's regional titles in the UK. For the last 7 years, I've been a media consultant specialising in working with mainly regional press organisations and with a special interest in leadership development.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And now my final panelist, the very esteemed Alison Gow.
Hiya. Welcome to the all-comers pass the parcel game. So I'm Alison Gow. I'm an alumni of the Journalism Leaders programme, and I've worked in regional journalism for about 30 years. These days I've been working in media consultancy, but primarily around like newsroom transformation and mentoring young leaders who are like helping newsrooms go through change. So that's me.
Okay.
Pass it back to Jess.
Right, thanks, Alison. I think if we just leave that there in the middle. And we tight weaving. Yeah.
Cozy up.
This is disruptive innovation in action.
So you can see 3 of you now.
Yeah. Can't see you now, Jess.
That's okay, because people know what I look like, and you're the important ones. You're the panelists for today. It was quite interesting that this is billed as the SENSEMAKERS. You know, you are 3 people who've got many years in the media industry. And we've heard some really interesting insights and conversations from this afternoon. I'd like to just really kick off in terms of, so what sense did you make of what you've heard this afternoon, particularly, I think, from the young leaders, as with the trailblazers, as they were labelled, in terms of what they were making of the industry and what you've heard from it. So, Neil, I wonder whether you want to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It felt like a massive injection of hope as far as I was concerned. I thought both panels were terrific, and you couldn't fail to be impressed, I didn't think, by the absolute clarity with which everyone spoke. Talk of the North Star, people knowing what their key objective is and being very sort of clear on that, not clutter, just a very sort of simple and understandable message. Lots of positivity. In the second panel, I thought sort of the approaches to innovation and their thoughtfulness around that in their respective markets was terrific and inspiring. Of the sort of little nuggets that I took away, I really loved that phrase about force yourself to learn. When if you don't know everything, then make sure that you get your head around things and understand them, because you're going to need that sort of knowledge going forward. The other 2 things, one was really knowing what makes your people tick. So the very interesting discussion around millennials managing Gen Zers, and even within that small sort of age difference, a different outlook, different sort of outlook on life and work, and the balance between the two. I thought that was really interesting. And the final thing was around being prepared to say, I don't know. I think that was a really interesting thing. I think there's lots of research now that shows that leaders who show humility, it's very much appreciated by their teams. And also it touches on this idea of vulnerable leadership, not being afraid to show your vulnerability and the fact you haven't got all the answers, which makes you more human, more approachable, and it makes it easier to have a collaborative approach. So really, overall, tremendously impressed.
Yeah, great summary there, Neil. And yeah, I took away that it's from the Trailblazers, and they called it the intergenerational manner, that they see themselves as the bridge between the old guard, people like you and me, and the phrase I hadn't heard until today, the Gen Z or Gen Alpha people as well. So these are now the intermediaries between these two groups. Alison, I wonder what sense you made of what you heard this afternoon.
Yeah, I could have listened to people talking about kind of particularly Gen Alpha and the challenges that are coming there all afternoon. I think that we talk about AI, but I think Gen Alpha is going to have a lot of unique challenges in itself, a completely different way of thinking, working and interacting with digital spaces and living people than anything we've seen before. So my two takeaways, one was very kind of immediate and centered around something, and the other one's a bit more subliminal. But I thought I really liked, I think it was Rachel that had like that little takeaway from the strategy. So every year there's like a tag in the strategy, and it was make them look, make them think, and make them care.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that. I thought that was such a clever way of like just breaking down some really big overarching themes into 3 points everybody could get behind. And then the other thing that really impressed me is just the current of understanding and knowledge that sustainability and accountability around sustainability is going to have to be the thread that runs through every business decision that is made, large or small, and it's only going to become more important to the audience. And I guess that's so close to you.
That works brilliantly into our green chair, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I was very heartened to hear, obviously, our green chairs bringing the environmental issues to the fore. I think Rachel was absolutely right when she alluded to, there was going to be a lot more collaboration needed. There's going to be different systems needed. And she mentioned that kind of lag in how things are presented. But I do think it's important when we're looking at this issue that it's not just about what we're kind of preaching to everybody else and trying to take our role as educators seriously, and it is actually looking in our own backyard as well. So it was interesting to hear from Jackie, the other green chair, about actionable impact, and actionable came up quite a few times. So it's something very dear to my heart, so I'd probably pick up on it extra, but it was really interesting to hear that kind of positive contribution that as a business, as an industry, we should make in this area as well. So yeah, very positive, as everybody said, and very heartening to hear these things being taken on board.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And part of the title of this whole afternoon was making clarity from the chaos. And I'm with you, Neil, a little bit in terms of I didn't get a sense of chaos today. I got a sense of assuredness and positivity around, the prospects for the future. But so I just wanted to bring it back, in terms of, we have seen rapid change. We have seen a lot of chaos in our times. So how's that rapid change in news and news consumption had a fundamental change on our audiences and how we need to interact with our audiences, do you think?
Yeah, I think this is takes us into an interesting area. I think I've noticed particularly in the environmental journalism area that there's a problem. We know there's a problem with news avoidance. We've seen from the Reuters survey, 36% of those surveyed found news depressing, and they find it something they don't necessarily want to take into their daily lives. This is something quite new, I think, to us as a society. we see things like solutions journalism coming forward that looks like it might kind of help fill that gap. But again, we go back to that actionable thing. There is a lot of public appetite for activism, for doing things, for taking part in things. I did myself a survey in the past couple of weeks, asking readers if they agree with statements, and the one that well over 50% agreed with was that I care passionately and I want to do something. And I think that is really heartening, but it's also a bit of a call to us in media to answer that and provide ways for people to action.
We spoke, we had a conversation this morning about, the changing trends, if you like, or the phases of the media industry. And one of the things that we talked about was this loss of control over the audience.
Yeah.
Back in the early 2000s, and before that, we had absolute control as the intermediary between, the audience and the advertisers, etc. So this whole idea of that impact now, that the change that we need to make, what sense have you made from that?
I think for the traditional legacy media, that is the big challenge, because we've been leapfrogged by a lot of digital startups. Lad Bible being a good example that John Birchall was talking about. So I think it requires a fundamental and a very big rethink about what's the position of the legacy media within this very complex ecosystem that we now inhabit. And I think, if we're being honest about it, I would say that speaking certainly for the UK regional press, and I think this applied in the US as well, probably in Western Europe, was that news publishers who were primarily print thought they knew their audience and would say, we know our readers, and actually they didn't. They knew how many readers they got, but they didn't really know what their likes, interests and key drivers were. And the likes of Amazon, someone outside the news environment, but the way they know their customers and can talk to them in a relevant way all the time is something that we really need to catch up on really quickly. But I think that's been one of the lessons learned over the last sort of 20-25 years. There's been a lack of investment to understand our readers and what they really want from us, and I think that's probably more important now than ever.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And Alison, in terms of, we heard in that second panel about the rise of the influencers and the self-publicists and new entrants in the market. So how do we find our space, as the traditional publisher? How do we find our space in that new media ecosystem?
I think we have to stop trying to be all things to all people and narrow in on what we're good at, which is not necessarily always the financially lucrative side of things. And that's the dichotomy, isn't it? But a trusted news provider, which an organization, whether it's like a newish independent or like a more legacy brand, somebody at the back of that legacy or newer independent is always going to be able to provide the kind of information that makes sense from the chaos. I don't want to be too ghoulish about this, but the Nicola Bulley situation in Preston, where you had traditional, if you like, media and a kind of TikTok social media journalist with inverted commas around it, going out and all covering the same. I think that very quickly sorted where was the quality, verified, authentic information coming from versus where's the opinion and the sensationalist, get the audience in. And I think that's where, as news providers, we have to step back from being the all things to all people, because if you're going for scale, you're always going to end up doing things that compromise the audience faith in you.
Yeah. Okay. And can I throw that over to the Green Chair, Sarah? So, in terms of how do we find our space in a sustainable way?
Yeah. just on the all things to all people point, I couldn't agree more with that. I think our space is a niche space sometimes, a deep space. And certainly in the sorts of things that I'm sort of looking at, I feel that people, they want the quality and they want depth rather than sort of shallow and scattered across a multitude of topics, which is obviously how it was better to do that when you had print and you could present one thing to one page and one thing to another, and it's a totally different world. On the point of the sustainability side of it, I mean, obviously looking at our own businesses, okay, that granted is easier if you're a tiny startup like myself compared to a giant like Reach. The same principles still stand, and I think, you know, it's looking across everything we do. I have some handy cards which I keep on my desk, and just to sort of bring home that kind of thing, that are practical things we can all do. Obvious ones are things like waste. We all know what, you know, we all know about recycling and bins. Perhaps less obvious things like transport. Do we use renewable energy in our businesses? Do we look at our supply chains? There are lots of actual sort of day-to-day things that we can do to bring some sustainability into our businesses. After all, our businesses, however large we are or however small we are, and we should be trying to take a lead on that side of it as well.
You think enough people are talking about those 4, 5 cards that you've got, you know, in terms of, do you think we have visibility in our business around those 5 things?
I'd like to think so, but these cards actually came from a conference about better business, so some people are talking about it. I think I was the only media person there, apart from somebody who was on a panel to talk about should we stop reading the news altogether. So I think, you know, it is talked about, but not necessarily in our circles. So perhaps we should start talking about it and show we're part of the conversation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm just conscious we probably need to be wrapping off relatively shortly, but
can I ask you one thing then?
Yeah, of course you can.
What was your big takeaway, Jazz?
Well, my big takeaway is going to be leading to the question I was going to ask you, and that was the fact that I was filled with a real sense of optimism around what I heard from the young leaders. And I don't know whether it sounds really condescending to call them young leaders now, because as they said, young is just a mindset. And these guys were really impressive. They were very intelligent in terms of, you know, their reading of what needs to happen to the industry, and they sounded like they'd been around for 25 to 30 years in terms of, you know, their depth of knowledge, their breadth of conversation that they had, and also their, as you said, Neil, you know, the authenticity and vulnerability of leadership, which I talk about an awful lot, you know, when I do my training, is that, you know, without that, you know, you are not going to be a great leader. So my takeaway was one filled with absolute confidence in that generation coming through, who are going to lead our industry. So on that point, you know, in terms of just one final thing, so how do we empower these new leaders to come through and take charge of our industry?
Well, they're starting to come through. I mean, there's 3, 4 very good examples today of people who are in influential positions at a much earlier stage in their career than the previous generation like us would have been. But I think what's required now is for the industry, the UK press industry, and I would say we should also reach out into Europe as well, because we need to speak with one voice, because each publisher speaking on their own counts for nothing when you're trying to talk to Google, Facebook, or whoever else. So the bigger single voice we can have, the better, in terms of dealing with our frenemies and trying to get a fair deal for honest, genuine, believable media.
And do you think, sorry Neil, but and do you think, Alison in particular, you know, what we've heard today, trying to make sense of what we've heard today, that we can see more of that opportunity coming through greater collaboration than we had when we were leading, you know, our brands?
In some areas, I think so. I think that there is kind of the hierarchical approach is going to exist for some time, particularly around institutions and regulatory bodies speaking only to those people and not maybe pulling in enough voices. I think it's been great when you've seen parliamentary committees getting, you know, more of the independent people, younger journalists coming in, young editors to give evidence to them. But I still feel like there's a layer of who is allowed to speak at that level, who's the corporate press office going to let through to speak at that level. So I would just like to see a flattening of the opportunity to highlight the issues. I think, you know, the young leaders and the sustainability panel today, if we'd had maybe, you know, some government people listening to that, they'd have been really surprised about the optimism and the thought and the intent around not just journalism but sustainability and responsibility. So yeah, that's my take on
thank
it.
you. And so just closing it off, Sarah, you know, in terms of looking at the future sustainability, you know, how confident are you that we have got a sustainable future?
Well, I think our young panel today, you know, showed us a great way forward. I think also, though, on this point of collaboration, great if we can collaborate between ourselves as an industry, fantastic. But I think we need to look outside of the media industry and look at how other industries have managed it, and particularly on the sustainability front, we have a lot to learn. We've got a long way to go. We need to be a little bit more humble about it and actually go out and try and find some of these answers from other industries.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah, Alison and Neil. Francois, back to you.